With both Disney and Marvel already panicking over Ironheart episodes 1 through 3 and the ongoing ratings disaster that it is, there is also way too much focus on the LGBTQ community by the fandom in a negative manner. And it just needs to go away, I think, for a healthy story to grow, and for Riri to really share her limelight with...
Natalie AI thing seems utterly preposterous and ridiculous, and even for an MCU show, I'm finding it to be a little bit of a bridge too far to go. The Heist crew, all lame. Every single one of them, all lame.
And so in this, I'm not sure what they're meant to be, because this character isn't to be confused with Slug.
Slug, our hacker extraordinaire.
Who is also the exact opposite in the same show. I'm really confused.
It deserves your attention. Ironheart deserves your attention. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, they are desperate to get people to watch this show. After I did my reaction, I kept getting, hey, it wasn't that bad. I just watched it. Hey, I just watched the first 3 episodes. It wasn't that bad.
Ironheart might be one of the worst executed ideas ever in the MCU, because under all that garbage was actually potential.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark. It's like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, who is that? And she's like, I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark. And he's like, I like that girl. And then he like goes to do something else. Like that would be like the level of something that I think would possibly happen.
Ironheart is back, this time going to an uncomfortable place for viewers.
Ironheart is the biggest L of Marvel of all time. The reactions are just spectacular. Supposedly smarter than Tony Stark, bites an electric wire, sells her soul to gain magic powers, uses new powers to steal. What did the writers mean by this? Smoke detector beeps.
I can understand why she's frustrated. That's how I feel watching her interviews.
How do you feel about the impact that she's having on young Black girls? And I'm going to be completely honest, on Black women.
You know, this is yet another area that's getting vibrant. It's getting full in the way that it should be.
Ironheart is practically unwatchable.
This show basically keyed their car, their mom, and in their bowl of cereal in the morning.
They have Dominique Thorne, you know, going out there talking about DEI, LGBTQ rights, and how there's no agenda there, and she continues to do so. But the other thing is that they also had Robert Downey Jr., and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark.
Okay, listen. Ironheart just made Marvel history for all the wrong reasons. This wasn't just a weak premiere. This was a ghost drop, a $200 million Marvel series dumped on streaming like someone trying to erase it from existence. No fanfare, no press, not even a whisper from the MCU overlords. Just boom, and it's live. You know what that tells me? Disney knew. They knew this wasn't the next Iron Man. They knew it wasn't going to trend. They knew this was damage control dressed as content. And now, fans are connecting the dots. Streaming numbers, hidden, audience reviews, brutal. Even Rotten Tomatoes had to clean up 1-star ratings just to keep the thing afloat. IMDb, 3.7. That's lower than Eternals. Lower than Snow White? It's brutal. And Bob Iger, the guy's on full denial mode. He's saying Disney Plus is stronger than ever, while canceling shows, cutting budgets, and blaming fans for spreading negativity. Sorry, Bob, but you can't gaslight the internet. So today, we're talking about the Ironheart disaster that Disney hoped you wouldn't notice, how it exposed the streaming model's collapse, and why even RDJ couldn't save this one from sinking. So let's talk about how this whole thing went down. Because Ironheart wasn't just a flop. It was buried, like full-on Marvel crime scene mode. When has a Marvel show ever released with zero hype? No Comic-Con teaser, no Vanity Fair spreads, not even a TikTok trend. It was like they dropped the show behind a dumpster and whispered,
we already know that those out there like Dominique Thorne, the main actress of the show who plays Riri Williams, after really going after fans and really going after the critics, it's only making matters worse for both Disney and Marvel.
Hope nobody sees this. And that's not an exaggeration. Disney didn't host a single premiere event. No cast interviews, no trailer buzz, not even a press junket with Dominique Thorne or Robert Downey Jr., who was originally supposed to co-sign the whole thing. This wasn't a soft launch, it was a straight-up evacuation, and fans noticed. On Reddit, people were asking, wait, Ironheart is out? Because most of the fandom didn't even realize it dropped. They released the first 3 episodes on a random Tuesday, then the rest 1 week later. No cliffhangers, no build-up, no memes. It was over before people even knew it started. That's not how you treat a future franchise lead. That's not how you introduce the next Iron Man. That's what you do when you're trying to quietly back away from the body. And let's not forget, this is the same company that gave She-Hulk and Secret Invasion full-blown rollouts, despite all the chaos. Even those got banners, posters, interviews, and post-episode breakdowns. But Ironheart? Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Why? Because they knew. They knew the audience wasn't going to show up. They knew the numbers would be a disaster. And most importantly, they knew this wasn't a project worth defending. What makes this even worse is that Marvel acted like this was some kind of fan-led experiment, as if the future of Ironheart would depend on viewer interest. But the truth? There was no viewer interest to begin with. There were no fan campaigns, no #Renew Ironheart hashtags, not even hate watchers came out. And when even the trolls are silent, you've got a serious problem. But the real chaos came when the numbers started leaking. And trust me, this flop wasn't just artistic, it was financial devastation. Stay with me.
The thing about Ironheart is that yes, we do know that the last 3 episodes will be debuting tonight, by the way, really fulfilling the show for season 1, and I highly doubt that there's going to be a season 2, based on the ratings disaster that it is, based on the critics really calling this show out for what it is.
So here's where it gets wild. Disney dropped Ironheart like a dirty secret, but behind that stealth release was a mind-blowing number: $200 million. Yeah, that's how much Marvel quietly spent on this show they didn't even bother to promote. To put that in perspective, that's the same ballpark as Secret Invasion and She-Hulk, both of which were already considered budget busters. But with Ironheart, there wasn't even a whisper of return on that investment. No charts, no viewer stats, no trending moments, just a $200 million question mark. And you've got to ask yourself, where did that money go? Because what we got on screen didn't look like a $200 million production. Fans complained about the clunky visuals, awkward pacing, and forgettable side characters. And the big twist, the one they thought would set social media on fire, a deal with Mephisto. Yep. Riri Williams, the supposed next Iron Man, made a literal pact with the devil. Let that sink in. Marvel wanted this to be a symbol of empowerment, but by the finale, the internet was calling it brand suicide. Because let's be real, what audience was this meant for? The hardcore MCU crowd checked out by episode 1. New viewers didn't even know it existed. And legacy fans, they were too busy rewatching Daredevil to bother. This wasn't just a flop, it was a warning sign. And Disney knew it. That's why they didn't talk numbers. When Agatha launched, they bragged about 9.3 million views. When Daredevil, Born Again dropped, they hyped up 7.5 million. But with Ironheart, total blackout. No data, no spin, no excuses. Because if those numbers had been even halfway decent, you better believe they'd have plastered them across every screen on Earth. But they didn't. And that silence, that's the loudest failure of all. And just when it couldn't get any worse, the guy at the top, Bob Iger, decided to go full spin mode. But what he said next? Yeah, it only made things worse. Let's get into that next.
Certain is that this is a show that nobody asked for. This is also a show that is based on a comic back in 2016 that was canceled, quite frankly. That's also another fact that people have to realize. But focusing on Disney CEO Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, they are desperately trying to oversell this show to a degree that we have never seen before.
Now, if you think Ironheart's flop was just a Marvel problem, think again. Because this mess exposed something way bigger. Disney Plus is falling apart, and the CEO himself, Bob Iger, is scrambling to keep the illusion alive. Let's rewind for a second. Back in 2019, Disney Plus was launched like the future of entertainment. A Marvel show every quarter, Star Wars spin-offs left and right, Pixar exclusives, they were throwing billions at content like money grew on lightsabers. And for a while, it worked. Subscriber numbers exploded. The Mandalorian was a smash. People believed the hype. But behind the scenes, that business model was burning cash at record speed. And now it's all catching up. Enter Tony Gilroy, the writer and showrunner of Andor, a respected Star Wars insider. During a press tour, he basically said the quiet part out loud. Disney doesn't have the money anymore. Not for these massive shows. Not for high-concept, high-cost content. Not for anything beyond basic survival. Let that sink in. This wasn't some anonymous leak or disgruntled YouTuber. This was a top-tier Disney creator going on record to say the wallet's empty. And Disney's response? Silence. No denial, no spin, just awkward corporate crickets. Meanwhile, Bob Iger is out here trying to convince shareholders everything's fine. He's calling the streaming strategy stronger than ever, while literally canceling shows, cutting budgets, and laying off teams behind the scenes. And the cherry on top? He started blaming critics, saying any negative feedback is politically motivated.
So let's get into this. Now, one thing about Bob Iger is that we know that I, along with many others out there, like to call him Bob Liger, because all this guy does is lie to the audience, he lies to the shareholders, he lies to anybody out there, in order to really kind of string them along into the following year in hopes that they will stay around, whether it's shareholders or customers. And we already know that Disney Plus is a failing platform.
Yeah, because fans cancel their subscriptions over politics, not because the content feels rushed, empty, and overpriced. And look, viewers aren't stupid. They're seeing the math. Fewer shows, higher prices, and less transparency. Disney Plus went from being the most hyped platform on Earth to quietly deleting shows and dodging questions. Ironheart was just the final red flag. The flop that revealed the streaming bubble was way too big, way too fast, and now it's popping in real time. But Bob Iger didn't stop there. When the numbers kept crashing, he shifted the blame again, and this time, he pointed it straight at the fans. Yep, you heard that right. Let's break that down next. Alright, now here's where things get shady. Because while Marvel was hoping Ironheart would quietly fade away, the numbers started leaking, and they were ugly. Let's start with the basics. IMDb score, a brutal 3.7 out of 10. That's not just bad. That's Snow White reboot bad. That's Eternals on a bad day bad. And it gets worse. 52% of users gave it a 1-star rating. That's more than half the audience saying this show wasn't just mid, it was trash. But where it gets really suspicious is the complete blackout on viewership data. Disney loves bragging when things go right. Remember when Agatha pulled 9.3 million views? Or when Daredevil Born Again hit 7.5 million in week 1? They had banners, press releases, the whole works. But with Ironheart, nothing. No press statements, no most watched badges, not even a shady chart from some secondhand tracking site. Just silence. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Because if the numbers were decent, you better believe Bob Iger would have had them plastered across every investor call and Twitter thread. The fact that they didn't release a single digit, that tells you everything you need to know. Insiders say Ironheart didn't even crack the top 10 during premiere week. That's basically impossible for a Marvel show. Even Echo got some numbers, and that show had zero buzz. But Ironheart? Radio silence. Meanwhile, review platforms started cleaning up the damage. Rotten Tomatoes allegedly scrubbed a wave of 1-star audience scores. One day it's tanking, the next day, magically balanced. But even after the cleanup, still low 40s on the audience side, you can only wipe so much dirt off a cracked mirror.
It is a failing business model for, of course, Disney. You know, we already know that Tony Gilroy admitted to this, the guy who created the Andor series, both Season 1 and Season 2. Disney just doesn't have the amount of money that they have anymore to create all of these shows. However, interestingly enough, with the Ironheart ratings disaster only getting worse for those at Disney and Marvel.
And yet, Disney kept pretending everything was fine. No official comment, no apology, no accountability, just a hope that the internet would move on. But it didn't. And right as the numbers were nosediving, Dominique Thorne, Ironheart herself, decided to speak up. What she said? Yeah, that lit a whole new fire. Let's talk about it next. Now, just when the backlash around Ironheart seemed like it couldn't get any worse, it did. Because Dominique Thorne, the actress who plays Riri Williams, decided to address the criticism head-on. And let's just say, it didn't exactly calm things down. In what looked like a last-ditch attempt to salvage the show's image, Thorne came out swinging. In interviews and social posts, she claimed that fans were focusing too much on diversity and LGBTQ support, instead of just watching the show for what it is. Her exact words, that Marvel fans just need to take a step back and stop seeing everything as some kind of hidden message. And look, we get it. Online hate exists. Some people will complain no matter what. But here's the thing. A huge chunk of the backlash wasn't about representation. It was about execution. Viewers weren't rejecting Ironheart because it had a black female lead. They were rejecting it because the story felt empty, the characters didn't grow, and the finale involved making a literal deal with the devil. That's not subtle allegory, that's just confusing. But by framing the criticism as fan bias, Thorne ended up alienating the exact audience the show desperately needed. Instead of engaging with valid concerns like pacing, character depth, or why a $200 million show felt so flat, she brushed it all off as people not getting it. That never goes well. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. People weren't just calling out the show anymore, they were calling out the actress. Threads popped up asking why Marvel actors keep blaming the audience. YouTubers started breaking down how this same defensive energy showed up with the Marvels, She-Hulk, and now Ironheart. It felt like deja vu. Another MCU project tanks, and instead of accountability, we get finger-pointing. And meanwhile, Disney stayed quiet. No clarification, no distancing. Just silence, as if they were waiting for the whole thing to blow over. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And the truth is, this wasn't just about Dominique Thorne or the backlash. It was about the bigger problem underneath all of it. A problem that starts with how Disney is writing these characters in the first place. And that's exactly what we're digging into next.
Already those like Kevin Feige and Bob Iger are heading into damage control mode at a level that we have never seen before. In this case, Bob Iger got very defensive after the LGBTQ backlash, and also in the midst of the ratings beginning to tank already. Now, Iger recently delivered the following in a desperate move to damage control the situation.
So, now we get to the real issue, the part that keeps coming up not just in Ironheart, but across so many of Disney's recent projects. It's the way these characters are being built, not from a place of story, but from a checklist. And Ironheart is the blueprint for that problem. On paper, Riri Williams should be an incredible character. She's a genius inventor, a teenage prodigy, and someone stepping into Iron Man's shadow. That has the makings of a compelling hero arc. But what we got instead felt more like corporate packaging than actual storytelling. She wasn't written as a person, she was written as a brand. Riri was always the smartest in the room, always the victim, always right. And as a result, there was no journey, no flaws to overcome, no real stakes, just a string of scenes that told us she was great, without ever showing us why. Fans didn't connect with her, not because she's a black woman. That's not the issue. The issue is that there was no emotional core, no vulnerability, no struggle. She didn't earn the tech, the title, or the moment. Everything just happened to her. And when your protagonist feels preloaded instead of developed, the story falls flat. And this isn't new for Disney. We saw the same thing in She-Hulk, in the Marvels, in Echo. Characters who are introduced as icons before they've done anything iconic. Characters who feel more like symbols than people. And here's the kicker. It's not the diversity that turns people off. It's the lazy execution wrapped in identity. Audiences want complex heroes. People who grow, who fail, who earn their place. Not characters who feel like they were created in a PR meeting. And when fans push back on that, Disney's first response is often to say, well, you must not like the message. But that's not it. What people don't like is when story gets replaced by slogans. And Ironheart, it became the ultimate example of that shift. A hollow series born from good intentions, but crippled by bad writing and corporate priorities. But if you think the fans are just overreacting, think again. Because what happened next wasn't outrage. It was worse. It was silence. Let's break down why even hate watchers didn't show up for this one. Alright, this next part might be the most brutal indicator of how far things have fallen. Not just for Ironheart, but for Marvel as a whole. Because it didn't just flop. It didn't just get roasted. It got ignored. And that's worse than anything else.
As CEO, it is 100% my responsibility to remain direct and transparent, and that doesn't just go for our customers, it goes for our shareholders as well. With our latest project, Ironheart, I want to be very truthful to our core customer base that our latest series is a wide success regardless of what you have been hearing in the trades.
See, when a show crashes and burns, it usually sparks some kind of reaction. Angry fans, heated Reddit threads, reaction videos, memes, something. She-Hulk trended for days, even if it was mostly jokes. Secret Invasion caught heat too. But Ironheart? Radio silence. No buzz, no backlash, no trending hashtags, no memes, no pitchforks, just indifference. The show dropped 6 full episodes and barely made a ripple. That's not just a failure, that's a cultural ghosting. Even the hate watchers, the people who tune in just to roast the writing or meme the CGI, they didn't show up. And that's terrifying if you're Marvel, because it means people don't even care enough to criticize it. It means your audience isn't mad, they're gone. Think about that. Eternals had think pieces, Echo got dragged, Captain Marvel 2 had controversy. But Ironheart, it came and went like it never existed. It was a $200 million content dump that didn't even spark rage. And when even controversy can't save your series from disappearing, that's the bottom. This is the moment where Disney should have realized that something is deeply wrong. Not just with this one project, but with their entire creative strategy. Because you can throw all the budget, branding, and buzzwords at a show, but if nobody's watching, none of that matters. And look, it's not about demanding every Marvel show be a masterpiece. Fans just want something worth talking about, something with passion, with conflict, with characters you actually root for. Ironheart didn't deliver that. It delivered silence. And in this content-saturated world, silence is the worst outcome possible. So now the question becomes, what does Disney do next? And based on Bob Iger's latest statements, they're not taking responsibility. They're shifting gears. And what that really means? We're breaking it down next. So, with Ironheart quietly imploding and Disney Plus bleeding cash, Bob Iger finally made a move. But instead of fixing the problem, he decided to pivot. Not forward, not smarter, just backward. Back to theaters. Back to the safe zone. Because behind closed doors, Disney execs are now admitting what many fans already guessed. The streaming boom is over. Iger even said it publicly. Disney's shifting focus away from Disney Plus and back toward theatrical releases. That's not a bold new direction. That's called retreating. And honestly, it's a weird flex.
There is an obvious narrative going around out there that our latest series that is a great projection of our business model to honor LGBTQ is forcing a message onto the people. I am here to say that this is so far from the truth, and that this needs to be said that we here at the Disney company have never engaged in any kind of a culture war.
Iger's selling it like a strategic shift, an exciting return to immersive cinema experiences. But let's be real, this isn't about better storytelling. This is about slashing budgets, canceling risky shows, and trying to stop the financial bleeding before investors lose faith completely. Ironheart didn't just bomb, it exposed how fragile Disney Plus really is. The platform was built on the idea that Marvel and Star Wars could churn out constant content forever. But when the quality dropped and fans checked out, the whole house of cards started shaking. So what's the new plan? Release fewer shows. Hike subscription prices, cut costs, and hope that big screen blockbusters can win fans back. Here's the problem. Theaters aren't guaranteed wins anymore either. The pandemic shifted viewing habits permanently, and Disney has already burned a lot of goodwill. Fans remember the delays, the rewrites, the forced cameos, the endless wait till the next one teases that never paid off. You can't just run back to theaters and expect everyone to cheer, especially not when Disney's message is basically, we're giving you less content for more money. And that's what makes this whole situation so surreal. Instead of listening to fan feedback, Disney's just changing the format. Instead of building stronger stories, they're retreating into nostalgia. And instead of admitting that Ironheart was a mistake, they're pretending it never happened. But here's the truth. Fans haven't forgotten. They're watching closely. And the silence, the gaslighting, the blame shifting, it's all piling up. So in this final section, let's talk about what this all means for Marvel's future, and whether they can still course correct before it's too late. Ironheart wasn't just a flop, it was a warning shot. A $200 million misfire that exposed the cracks in Disney's streaming empire. No buzz, no backlash, just silence. And in this game, silence is the death sentence. Bob Iger can pivot, Disney can retreat, but the audience has already moved on. Fans don't want corporate checklists, they want real characters, real arcs, real risk. Ironheart was supposed to launch a new era. Instead, it buried the old one. And unless Marvel wakes up, starts telling stories people actually care about, this won't be the last silent release. It'll just be the beginning of the end. Thanks for watching, and if you're still with me, drop your take in the comments. Do you think Disney can turn this around, or is the MCU magic gone for good? See you in the next one.